intentionally prioritizing the other. It's that you want to be together. For most couples, this drops off after 2 or 3 years of marriage because we quit doing those things we did when we were dating. The couple identity has a strong sense of us, and that recognizes that there's a husband and a wife, and then there's a couple. So it'd be Mike and Lana, we are 2 individuals, but also we are the Worthams together. We are no longer 2 individuals making decisions independently. Our identity as a team increases. The couple has a strong sense of us. Those 2 individual people come together to form a new identity as a team that makes decisions together. The decisions that need to be made are viewed from the perspective of how will this affect us? Dedication commitment can be a bad thing if it's spread too thin and if it's spread all over the place. If you are saying lots of yeses to things all over, then that commitment, let me start over. Dedication commitment can be a bad thing if it's spread all over the place. And I did that some. If you're saying yes to lots of other things and trusting that the commitment of your spouse will hold your marriage together, you'll end up straining as a couple. And you'll lose some of that connectedness. So this is what I did. I like to be helpful, and I was taught as a kid to always keep my word. I also didn't like checking in with my wife before making a decision because it made me feel controlled by her. When someone would call and ask me for help, my initial response was to say, sure. Then I would talk to my wife about it, and she would remind me, oh, we were planning on or I really need you to this, or the family needs you. But because of my strong sense of commitment and to keep my word, I wouldn't allow myself to back out of what I was already committed to. And so guys, just to give the other side of this, that was in a time when I worked a whole bunch and this relationship wasn't great. So her tank was kind of empty. So anything that drew me away kind of put a stress on her. So her desire was to say no to everything, and I wanted to say yes to those things, and then if I didn't, this relationship got strained. So it was kind of a vicious circle. Lots of work, not much of this time together, and anytime I wanted to do something else, she would say, oh, honey, and that's where the struggle came in.
Next slide.
Are you guys making time to prioritize your marriage? So prioritizing that is crucial if you want it to keep going. Maintaining your priorities requires you to be willing to say no to things, even good things. So I want to ask you, what are some of those good things that you guys have had to say no to, or that you choose to? We can, even a wife can answer to. Does anybody have something? A barbecue at your friend's house, yes?
Dinner with friends.
Yeah, friends, dinner.
What about even like volunteering at church? Or like those are some really good things to be involved in, right? But they can also pull you away, and maybe now isn't the season for that.
Many of those good things unintentionally create barriers for a strong marriage when not kept in check. Busyness kills dedication, which kills emotional connectedness, which often leaves us with only constraint holding the marriage together. I think back to Genesis, when it says that Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed, that nakedness was not just physical, but also relational. There's a sense of emotional safety when you can bare your heart, share your worries and dreams and weaknesses with someone else, and not be ashamed or being fearful of being ignored or rejected. Busyness can often take the form of good things. For me, it was wanting to use my gift of helps. For others, it might be that each of your kids is in a different sport or music lessons. It might be one of your guys' hobbies. Or at the end of the day, when dad gets home and he's tired from work, and mom spent all day homeschooling and managing the house, and she's tired, the time and energy to put into the marriage relationship just isn't there. Connecting to the lack of time and energy is a factor that you're trying to make ends meet on a single income adds extra stress. Okay, if we could play the video.
Baby, tell me, where'd you ever learn to fight without saying no word? Then walks back into my life like it's all gonna be alright. Don't you know how much it hurts when we don't talk, when we don't touch, when it doesn't feel like we're even in love? It matters to me when I don't know what to say, don't know what to do, don't know if it really even matters to you. How can I make you see it matters to me? When I don't know what to say, don't know what to do, don't know if it really even matters to you. How can I make you see it matters to me?
For a while we were homeschooling our kids, our marriage looked a lot like this couple in the video. We were committed, efficient roommates with our constraint commitments keeping us together. Right? When you're homeschooling, it's really easy to focus on the kids' education, and that's a big priority, plus all the household things that you need to keep going. And in our case, he worked lots of hours, right, so that we could make that one income work. So we were each doing our part to keep the family functioning, but did not prioritize the areas needed to build our dedication commitment to stay emotionally connected. So now we'd like to shift our focus to some healthy habits we can implement to strengthen our marriage. When implemented, these habits can increase the emotional connection to strengthen your marriage. Connecting daily, dating weekly, and getting away annually are effective habits that help increase your dedication commitment. And I know, I can already hear in your heads, like, who has time for that, right? I get it. So we're gonna unpack what maybe the ideal looks like, and then maybe, well, we will share some of the things we did well and some of the areas we still have room for improvement. Okay, next. So to connect daily, Dr. Randy Schroeder, a licensed counselor and author, identified 4 practical stay-in-love habits that every couple used to do when dating, but cease doing, or at least it's significantly diminished once you become married, right? All of those constraint commitments just kind of there's more and more on your plate, and your relationship with your spouse and doing all of those things that you did when you were dating, they just kind of get squeezed out. So 3 of the 4 habits that he talks about for daily check-ins. These are just ideas for you guys. The eye-to-eye heart talk, 10 minutes, no distractions. The ideal is every day, but he also realizes that when you have kids at home, that might be a little bit of a lofty goal. Shoot for 3 times a week. Just start somewhere, right? Maybe 2 of those times are on Saturday and Sunday. And then maybe you just get 1 midweek check-in for 10 minutes with your spouse. We all did this when we were dating, right? We were looking into each other's eyes. Keep doing that. That establishes that emotional connection, and you get to see what's in your spouse's heart. The meaningful hugs and meaningful kisses. I would ask to see some hands, but I'm not going to. I think it would just be kind of fun. The seconds is not a hard and fast number. It's not about counting to 10 in your head, right? The point is that it's a lingering and lengthy kiss or a hug, and it's not just the brotherly, sisterly hug or peck on the cheek. Up until our kids were like in the middle school years, we practiced what was called couch time several nights a week. We weren't perfect. It didn't happen every night of the week. But the idea of couch time came from a parenting class we took. The first few minutes after your husband or whoever's working gets home, we would sit on the couch, visit each other, and attempt to reconnect and establish priority of our marriage relationship. We were also indirectly communicating to our kids that our marriage, not them, was the priority. And they witnessed that mom and dad's relationship was secure and that we loved each other. And that goes a long way in your kids' emotional health, right? When they know that mom and dad are doing well, they can be secure themselves. They were not allowed to interrupt during this time. We would set a timer on the oven or whatever. It's kind of before you had your cell phone. Timers really handy. So we'd set a timer on the oven, and they would just find something else to occupy themselves with while we had our 10 to 15 minute conversation. And then after we were done, the ritual of wrestling dad's socks off was their time with dad. Some of you may need to get creative if dad works late. Maybe you FaceTime a little bit, and while you're on the phone with dad, mom, whoever, kids learn. We don't interrupt mom and dad during this time. Okay, next. In addition to the longer daily check-ins just discussed by Dr. Schroeder, he also suggests couples strive for 10 to 12 quick connects a day to improve emotional connection. I don't know if we've really ever reached that. We did pretty good for a while, but I'm like, whoa, 10 to 12. And these are like that, less than 30 seconds. You can still use paper and pencil, right, and a sticky note. You can still do that, but you can also use technology, like a quick text. I love you, I'm thinking of you, can't wait for you to get home. The kids are driving me crazy. Not that part, but phone calls, those kinds of things. There is even an app, it's called Agape, and you can both sign up, create an account, and it will curate questions or prompts that take you less than a minute to answer, like what was your favorite memory of when we were dating, or that type of thing. It is a secular app, so you're going to want to filter your questions. I'll just give you that heads up. You want to be pretty specific on the type of questions that you want to answer. Also, physical quick connects. These can include the quick pecks on the cheeks, the hugs and holding hands in the car on the way to wherever you're going, putting your arm around each other, praying for each other or others' needs together is a way to connect spiritually. These are super easy to implement, and they don't take a whole lot of time out of your day. I think most of us would confess we spend maybe at least 30 seconds on social media a day. Not sure, but maybe. Next. Another important way to connect daily is to express appreciation. It's important to not take your spouse for granted It's easy to become complacent and not acknowledge all the meaningful things that they do for us. We stop saying please and thank you, right? We just expect that they're gonna meet that need, do that thing. We stop expressing the positives to our spouse, but we're very quick to remind them of all the things they forgot to do, did wrong, or just didn't get done. How you think about your partner influences how you treat them. By focusing on the positives of your marriage, such as the good moments from your past, or your partner's admirable traits, you put positive energy into your relationship. Now, turn your thoughts into action. Every time you express a verbal appreciation, no matter how small, you are strengthening your marriage.
I was thinking, so when I would get home late at night, way past the kids' bedtime, instead of Lana being angry or resentful for that, she would often say, thanks for working hard for us so that I can stay home and be with the kids. Just one of those ways that made me, it was a little easier to walk into the house and see her and her encouraging me rather than saying, oh, man, you missed this, this, and this.
The other helpful hint is to not criticize, correct, complain, or condemn within the first 5 minutes of the day. Like, that's pretty easy to do, right? You get up, just don't say it if you're thinking in it and it's negative. Keep it positive. Okay, next one.
So that means you got to be out of the house in 5 minutes.
The second marriage strengthening habit and fourth of Randy Schroeder's Stay in Love habits is for a couple to date weekly. The goal of dating is to have fun and not spend the time talking about problems, right? When you were dating, you weren't usually talking about kids' problems, right? You were having fun and you were talking about each other. With kids in the home and likely a single income, dating weekly may seem unattainable and unaffordable. So I like these suggestions. Consider the possibility of every other week and setting a dollar amount for an inexpensive date and a dollar amount for an inexpensive and an expensive. Then budget for that, right? How much conflict do we create out of unmet expectations? If you're thinking, yeah, let's go out for a date and we got $30 to spend, and your spouse is thinking, yeah, we're going out and we're going to dinner and a movie and we're getting a sitter, or we just don't have the money to do that, so you do nothing. If you're communicating some of these little details, that level of expectation or those frustrations from unmet expectations can really be avoided. And then maybe the other 2 weeks are in your house, and you take your kids to play with friends or nearby family, like grandparents, right? I don't know of any grandparents that are going to say, oh, we just get those grandkids way too much. We're just tired of them. Take turns choosing what you are going to do for your date. And when it's your turn, pick something your spouse would enjoy, right? That's a little bit self-sacrificial to say that, hey, I'm going to think about what he enjoys if I'm the one picking, right? You're communicating to your spouse, your needs and your desires are important to me.
So when we did those, I was the guy who wanted to do the shoulder-to-shoulder thing, so we would do a project together. And when it was Lana, I knew, oh, if I really want to be something for her, I need to pick one of those things where it's face-to-face time, and we got to sit and discuss and visit and ponder.
Yes, guys tend to prefer those shoulder-to-shoulder things. And us ladies like our eye-to-eye. In our family, on a one-income budget, the reality of money for a date night every week just really wasn't there. We substituted with most weeks in what would now be considered a small group. Back then, we had 3 families with kids the same age as us, and we were just living life together. We went to each other's houses, we brought food to share, we let all the kids play. They were just kind of unsupervised unless there was blood and screaming, which there probably could have been a couple of times. But the adults, we talked about our struggles in our marriage, we talked about our struggles parenting, and we prayed together. Maybe that's not a traditional date night, but it was incredibly encouraging to us in that season of life, and encouraging to our kids too. Now, I will confess, this is still an area, the dating weekly, that we need improvement. Our last date was to our friend's daughter's graduation party, where we ate free food, and then we went to our nephew's middle school play. So, lame if you want, but that's what we did. Next. So, we would love to hear from you guys. If any of you, and they can be inexpensive or expensive date ideas, from taking a walk, from going to a hike. If you guys have experienced, this was our best date ever. Because in Wyoming, it's incredibly hard to get creative and think of things to do, right? Besides in the movie and dinner rut.
In our family, we have the too hot, too cold, or too windy. So that kind of narrows it down because those are our 3 seasons. Does somebody else have something they do? Yes.
The best investment for a marriage thus far has been a hot tub.
Oh,
Oh,
We have hot tub date nights after kids are in bed or while they're still awake.
very good. When our kids were, 8 and 10-ish, we had saved up some money and we said, would you guys like us to put another bathroom in our house, or would you like us to get a boat? And they unanimously were like, let's get the boat. It's not a nice new shiny boat, but it's a boat. And that accomplished some really great things for our family. One, it kept our kids with us, like in the boat. And also, it did give us some date night things, at least during the summer. We could go get out on the lake for something fun to do. Okay, the final healthy habit is to get away annually as a couple. Getting away annually allows couples focused time to reconnect, reprioritize. Remember, what are you committed to? Each other, right? Because we're empty nesters now, and while you are in the throes of raising kids and educating kids, they leave. And then it is just the 2 of you again. It allows you to have deeper discussions, have fun together, and create new memories. Again, this is an area where we would receive a needs improvement score for 2 reasons. Then I did not really understand the importance of it, and we didn't really budget for it. And I am not spontaneous, so if the money wasn't set aside, I would be pretty inflexible and we weren't going to do it. I do regret that, but at that time, on a tight budget, we would send our kids overnight or for the weekend to grandparents' or friends' houses and have a staycation at home. It gave us uninterrupted time as a couple on a tight budget. This isn't to say we never got away, but it maybe just wasn't annually that we got to go somewhere. Okay, next. So, if and when you do get to get that annual getaway, one way to make the getaway even more valuable is to attend a marriage enrichment event. Family Life offers a weekend to remember and a Love Like You Mean It cruise. They're kind of ones in the maybe a little more inexpensive range, and the other one would qualify maybe as a more expensive one. But and if you stop by our booth in the vendor area, you can sign up for a drawing for a free giveaway to the Weekend to Remember conference, and I believe the closest one for us is in Estes Park, Colorado. Focus on the Family also has marriage getaway events, and check in with your church or another church in your community and see if they're offering some type of marriage enrichment event. Next one. So, implementing change. We've provided you with several suggestions for strengthening your marriage. Daily check-ins, dating weekly, getaway annually, as well as several practical ideas to implement. These are beneficial, but may seem overwhelming to think about doing them all. I know my husband is easily overwhelmed, and, well, I am too. But that, when you get a New Year's resolution, you think, oh, I'm going to do all of this, and then you die off. Start small. Choose one or two that are specifically related to areas you need to improve on, and then be intentional about making them happen. Change doesn't happen by wishing, right? Pray about them. Ask the Lord, what area do I need to be more supportive, intentional with my relationship with my husband? Write them down. Set a reminder on your phone. It's not a sin to set a reminder to, hey, I need to encourage my husband. I need to encourage my wife. And then set a date that you're going to check your progress. Like go back and say, oh, how many times did I actually do that in the last 2 weeks? The important thing is to start, but make it realistic, like something that you can realistically achieve doing in the midst of homeschooling. Oh, you wanna?
So we're going to transition now into talking about the relationship killers. To begin with, we would like each of you to complete a survey. You do not have to turn it in. No one else is going to look at it unless you show it to them. This is for you. Then when you're done, you can write the score on the bottom, and that'll just give you an idea of where you're at.
Oh, did I? I don't know how many. There's only 26 questions.
We'll try and give you about 10 minutes to do this, see if everybody can get done.
There's one more. Oh yeah, you better get that other side. Do you want one? Did everybody get one? Does everybody have something to write with? I do have a few pens if... Oh, sorry.
How's everybody doing? Does somebody need some more time? For the sake of time, then, I think I'll just start going and you guys can finish. So this is John Gottman's Four Horsemen. John Gottman is a relational expert who identified 4 horsemen, and these are destructive communication styles that when significantly present in a marriage, the marriage is likely to end in divorce. He got it up to, it should be figured about over 90% accuracy on if you had these in your relationship that it would end in divorce. They are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. We all may, at some point or another, use one of these, or even a couple of them. The problem lies in if our communication is characterized by one or more of these. All relationships, even the most successful ones, have conflict. It's unavoidable. Fortunately, Gottman's research shows that it's not the appearance of conflict, but rather how it's managed that predicts the success or failure of a relationship. It's important to note that we say manage conflict rather than resolve, because relationship conflict is natural and has a functional, positive aspect that provides opportunity for growth and understanding. The good news is there is an antidote for every one of the horsemen. To effectively manage conflict in your marriage, you need to be able to identify and counteract the 4 horsemen with the antidote. So the first one is criticism. A complaint focuses on a specific behavior, but criticism attacks the person's character. You never, you always. Attacking the other person's character signals bottled up frustration or unmet needs, and it leads to contempt. The antidote is, for criticism, to use a soft startup. What we mean by this is to think about, what do I feel and what do I need to do? And then express that need with an I statement. I don't feel valued when you don't check in with me before you agree to do something with your friends. Would you be willing to talk about it with me first and then get back to them? That's one I've had to use, or we've talked about a lot in our marriage. The second one is contempt. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and shows up in the statements that come from a position of moral superiority. This person may use mockery or sarcasm. Contempt signals a long-term resentment, not just a one-time failure, and it conveys disgust. I'm better than you, you are less than me.
You can skip the next slide and go to the next, yeah, go ahead, thank you.
Antidote for contempt is to treat each other with respect, to build a culture of appreciation. If you regularly express appreciation, gratitude, and affection, and respect for your spouse, you'll create a positive perspective in your relationship that will minimize those negative feelings. Assume the best about your spouse rather than the worst. That's where Lana and I really had to work, was just not always assuming that she was doing something to annoy me. The more you focus on the positive, the less likely you'll feel or express contempt.
Okay, the next one. And just to know, we are skipping a slide here because we're up against our time, so we want to get through this. Defensiveness is defined as self-protection in the form of a righteous indignation in an attempt to ward off a perceived attack. Defending yourself by attacking your spouse and making excuses. So if you'll go to the slide 32, you got it? And play the video for us, please.
You! Oh!
Your fault. You!
My fault?
Your fault.
Oh!
Your fault.
You're right.
What?
It's my fault.
What do you mean your fault?
You're right, it's my fault. Maybe both of us?
Maybe just you.
Okay, so just apologize and move on. Take responsibility for your part. And the last one is stonewalling. It's an emotional withdrawal. It might look like your spouse is avoiding you, they're acting really busy, not talking to you, but what is happening here is a physiological response in the body. And it is different than the silent treatment. The silent treatment is intended to hurt the other person and maybe to win the argument, but stonewalling is actually your brain is being hijacked. You're kind of you get in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, and for you just literally, your brain shuts down, and you can't respond in that situation. So let's skip slide 34, and we'll just go to the antidote. So the antidote for stonewalling is to take a timeout. This really can work in lots of different areas of conflict, to take that time out, but communicate it to your spouse. I need to take a break to calm down. Give me 30 minutes, and then I can check back in with you. And some couples, you might want to come up with that nonverbal signal, like I need the time out. The important thing is, at the end of whatever agreed upon time that you've set, is that you come back together. And if you need more time, or one of both of you needs more time, that's still okay. But you need to communicate, I need more time. Otherwise, it looks like you're just avoiding the situation, right? So communicate, I still need some more time. The goal in the timeout is to actually calm down. So if you need to listen to music, take a walk, whatever it is that you do to calm down, you need to do that. Don't sit and ruminate about the issue and just think, well, next time I'm going to say this, and well, I should have done that. That's not really helping, right? So the goal is to calm down during that time. Okay, let's flip to slide 37, or 36, in case any of you wanted to quick look at the, yes, thank you. The horseman, criticism, express desire with an I statement. That's really important. You're not saying you, you're saying I feel, I need. Defensiveness, take responsibility for your part, don't make excuses. Contempt, build a culture of gratitude and appreciation. Stonewalling, take a break, calm down, and then come back and talk. Okay, and then slide 37. So these are just a few helpful resources. There's tons of things out there, but if you want to take a picture of that slide, if there's ones that you want to look into, feel free to do that. Again, we are with Wyoming Strong Families, and we do offer some marriage mentoring. We desire to get into churches and train other lay couples in church to also do marriage mentoring. So if marriages, they don't even have to be struggling. If you just want a boost up in your marriage, that is a resource available to you. We do, like I said, have a booth in the vendor area. So if you have questions for us, please come and talk to us. And we just want to leave you with a happy note, and then you can get out of here. So the last video, please.
If love was a melody, I'd want you to sing to me in that voice that whispers my name. If the world was a dance floor, I'd waltz you shore to shore while the steel and twin fiddles play. The love song that goes on forever, for worse and for better, we'll two-step together, and I'll hold you closer each day I go through this dance of a lifetime with your hand in mine, dance of a lifetime with you.
Excellent. Is there a bottle? Can I get a bottle of water? Whenever you get a chance. We ready for this? I think so. I'm sorry? That was awesome. I try not to come across that aggressive, though. You know? Sick 'em. I'm assuming I'm not going to get introduced, so. All right. No, Brennan said she wanted to say something first, so. Yeah, I know. I assume I'm not going to get introduced. I'm just going to go up there and I was told 2 o'clock, so if I get in trouble, I get in trouble. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Am I gonna have the theme music going on while I talk? It's kind of fun. All right, now that I have a microphone, I'm gonna really try not to yell. Is there a way to pull me down just a little bit? Just for some perspective, I preach at a country church in Elk Mountain, Wyoming. And I could fit my entire congregation in these first 3 rows right here. We do not have a microphone system. There is no screen at the front of our auditorium, mostly because it's a very old historic building and we kind of like the look of it. But if I broach into the preaching mode, sorry, but really not sorry. So, all right, we're going to be talking about in this section, don't take the cheese, the trap of school choice initiatives. This is a hot button topic. This is the session where I wonder whether or not I will never be invited back again because I caused too many problems when I talk about this. I do understand, appreciate, and respect that there are going to be different positions on this. So I'm going to be giving some information. If anybody in here decides that you don't like the information I'm giving and you don't want to take any of it for what it's worth, then you're welcome to not take it for what it's worth. That's what I'm going to be talking about. Don't take the cheese, the dangers of school choice initiatives. First of all, what is school choice? You've probably all heard of it. This has been big in legislators. It was big here in Wyoming over the last couple of legislative sessions. And in various states, it can take various forms. We've heard of vouchers. That came into being, probably 10 or 12 years ago in some of the states where there was basically a voucher that the government would give you. You could take it to an educational provider, get some money paid to that provider to give your children education. Some of it had to do more with Christian schools and private schools than it did with home education. Education savings account, if you've been tracking what's going on in Wyoming, then you're very familiar with what those are. I think the name is a little bit disingenuous. It is saving nobody anything. Is that hard to see up there? I see squints. Sorry if it's too hard to see. I think the name for education savings accounts is a little disingenuous. It is a government spending fund is exactly what it is. You're not saving anybody money. Even in our state, when they were talking about funding this or making sure they don't take funds that were previously designated for government schools and so forth. You've also got some states that are pursuing tax rebates or tax credits. I wrap all of these into this category of school choice initiatives and kind of talk about them together. And when you think about what drives school choice initiatives, oftentimes there are stories. And these stories can be true. Brennan, did you need to jump in? Because I know you were going to talk first, but I started ahead of you. Okay. If you need to have a few minutes at the end, just wave me down or something. So usually there's stories that come out, and I hear this all the time. But I know about these families, and these families have this situation. And because of this situation, without this money, there is no way they can escape the government schooling system. And I will grant that some of those stories I don't have an answer to. I can't, provide some sort of a retort and say, well, no, you're wrong on this, and you should just do what you got to do. So yes, there are some of those stories out there. I don't know all of the stories that are there, but the question becomes, should the stories drive our position on any given issue, or should a principle drive our decision? And I submit to you that it should be the principles that drive our decisions. Why people want school choice is actually fairly easy to see. They want school choices because what they've seen in schools is not successful. They've even seen from the school's own standards and from the school's own metrics that they are in fact failing. As homeschoolers, maybe you don't go look at this stuff. I looked at the most recent one of these that came out because there was some news reporting in Wyoming that was just glowing about how much better Wyoming had done. And the program, or the evaluation, is called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, NAEP. I think it comes out every 2 years. And they gauge the progress of students in reading, in math, in 4th grade and 8th grade, and then they provide these results to the state so that they can see how they're doing. The last one of these that came out was in 2024, and I believe it was in early 2025 when I was reading a news report, and it was talking about how much Wyoming had improved. And I believe the percentage level was 2% over the previous NAEP. So we're going in the right direction, right? When you look at statistics, you're looking for trends, you want to go in the right direction. We're going in the right direction. But the raw numbers were still near the 50% range in both math and reading for proficiency for students in 4th grade and 8th grade. Now, some of them varied higher and lower in different categories, but the raw numbers were awful. And yet all you could read in the news reports was how great we are doing, because we're going from, 42% to 44% of 8th graders who can read at their own standard reading level. So the question is this: are the schools failing? And I like this question because it's both yes and no. They are failing the students, but they are not failing in doing what common schools were designed to do, which is to provide a standardized product, pushing numbers of children through an industrialized system, having something cookie cutter coming out the other end. John Dewey, Horace Mann, Owen, I threw those names up there. Owen is an individual that is not often rolled into the history of education here in the United States, but he was an individual who tried a socialistic society very early in our nation's founding. He was before Horace Mann, and his society was a failure. It was one of those things where you look back and you say, okay, socialism doesn't work, and this is one of the examples that you can use to prove it. Part of his socialistic program was socialistic education. Everybody gets exactly the same educations provided by the community, the state, or whatever it happens to be. His idea was a failure, but he was successful in shipping his idea off to other countries, who picked it up and ran with it. And then later on, individuals such as Horace Mann went to those countries, saw what they were doing, caught that idea, and brought it back to the United States, put it into place. Horace Mann was a Unitarianist. Some people will say he didn't necessarily have the same Orthodox Christian theology that we would. He was not an atheist by any sense of a stretch of the imagination. But the plan that he put in place did not work. And he knew it didn't work. By the time he was done evaluating it, he knew it didn't work, but it still got pushed on. And then individuals like John Dewey picked it up and became the father of modern or progressive education, pushing us to where we have today. And if you look at these individuals, their stated goals, what they wanted to accomplish, and then you look at what our schools are today, you will see in that sense, they're not failures. They're not failures because they have accomplished what they were originally intended to accomplish. We have dangerous schooling situations. This is a good reason for wanting to get kids out of government schools, right? By the way, I know I'm preaching to the choir here. This is a homeschool convention. I'm not going to spend the whole time talking about what you shouldn't do. You're here because you're probably not doing this. Okay, but bullying, violence. 1 in 10 students will be sexually assaulted at some point during their K through 12 education if they go through the government schooling system. 1 in 10. Now, that may not be a huge percentage, but it's not a percentage where I'm willing to put my child into that situation where that's the likely outcome. Content of instruction, you hear about this all the time. News reports about, books that are in school libraries and, content of the curriculum where teachers are pushing their different agendas and so forth. Excuse me, second session in a row. Throat's a little bit dry. But then, of course, there's the bottom line here, which I think is one of the most important ones for us to consider as Christian home educators, is faith transference. And I use faith transference. It's a term that I used in some of the research I did during my doctoral studies. Basically, I'm talking about discipleship. Do you want to pass on to your children your family's faith tradition? I would hope that you do. I know not all families home educate strictly for faith-related reasons. Some simply say, I want to pass on my family's traditions and cultures. Your conservative values, if you have conservative values, do you want to pass those on to your children? I hope you want to pass those on to your children. All of those things are going to be impacted. That's why people want school choice. So the potential solutions to all of these problems that were on the previous slide is, well, let's break up the system as we have it now, breaking up the government schooling monopoly and the control of the teachers' unions. Now, I am for this. And so when I say I am for this, breaking up these things, I often get the, well, then you should be in support of, and we get down to the ESA question. If enough families get out of the system then will start to fail, collapse, fall, lose its funding, whatever it happens to be, whatever manner it is in the fall. So there's these ideas. So what are the solutions? We want to break up the government schooling system, so we're going to put out these school choice programs, ESAs, vouchers, tax credits, and so forth, and hopefully drive people away from this government schooling system. And so we've had a number of these that have been in place for more than a decade. And statistically speaking, we're not seeing a major drop in attendance in government education. Now, we are seeing drops in schooling overall across the board, but that has more to do with population decline than it does people getting out of the system specifically to go to alternate schooling choices. So in these places where vouchers and ESAs have been in place for a long time, we ask the question, why aren't we having a massive collapse of the government schooling system? Because that's what a lot of people pushing these want. I had legislators right here from Wyoming talk to me this year as we were testifying during the legislative session, and they said, look, you need to get on board with this. And if you don't support ESAs, you need to at least stop fighting it, because that's what we really want you to do, is just stop fighting it so that we can win our battle. Because, and they would communicate to me, the goal is get more people out of the government schooling system. But as we've seen statistically, that's not what it's doing. Primarily, what these programs end up doing is supporting people who are already out of the system. They are subsidizing people who are already out of the system. In other words, those who can get their children out of the system are doing it, and we need to encourage more people to do that. It's one of the things that I hope a home education convention does, not just to strengthen you in your resolve to homeschool, but strengthen you in your resolve to be able to reach others with the message that this is an impact spiritually and socially, and the whole 9 yards. Be advocates, be missionaries, if you want to use that term, for home education. So these are some of the potential solutions, but there's problems to a lot of these potential solutions as you would see them. Breaking up the government schooling monopolies. People say, well, charter schools are a great idea because charter schools don't have the influence of the teachers' unions that public schools have. From a Christian worldview perspective, in my opinion, they're not any different. Do they have a little bit more freedom to change their pedagogy and fire bad teachers? Yes, they probably have those freedoms. But they're still under the regulations of government schooling as far as what they have to teach, what they can't teach, and so forth. And when funds flow from the government, the education remains part of that system. So charter schools are public schools. They are still funded by taxpayer. How about let the money follow the child? That is the mantra of a number of people who are pushing school choice initiatives. Let the money follow the child. And it sounds really, really good, and it sounds like exactly what you want it to do. But the problems with that is that when the money follows the child, it is still being confiscated from taxpayers by force of law. It is still an abridgment of my conscientious stance against what is being taught in those schools. So as I pay my taxes for schooling, and just for any tax people that might be, watching a video, yes, I do pay my taxes. Okay, I may not like it, but I pay my taxes. I have a conscientious objection to what they are teaching, to that content. And to force somebody to fund something that goes against their conscious position is not moral. The government can use the money that it confiscates to fund things which you might have a conscientious objection. How about this one? And I love this comment. I want some of my money back. I pay a lot of taxes. I want some of my money back, and this is a program that's going to get me some of my money back. First of all, once your money hits the government coffers, it's not your money anymore. That's a concept that I try to communicate. It is, whenever I say something is government funded, a lot of times I will caveat and I'll say it's taxpayer funded. Yes, it comes from you and it goes to, but once it's in their hands, you have no control over it. And there are going to be things that the government will do with money that you may not want them to do. What do they really want with school choice programs? They really want to control and eventually to ban private education and even homeschooling. And if you don't believe me, read UNESCO's stated goals. They do not want homeschooling to be free. They want homeschooling to be under control. There are a number of organizations. I'm going to mention a couple of them. I didn't put names up on the slide because I really don't want to direct people to these organizations, but I do want you to be aware of them because they're organizations that are intent on pushing this information, and you really have to dig in to backgrounds to understand what organizations are doing and why they're doing it. So there's an organization called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. Did I get that one right? CRHE. I always mess up their acronym, okay? And their stated goal, that sounds good, right? Responsible home education. I want to be a responsible homeschooler. Sounds like it's really, really good. But if you dig into it, they're very, very pro-school choice. And their background, I like to describe it as a little bit of like disgruntled homeschoolers, right? Homeschoolers that went through something that didn't like it. And so now, their intent is to push regulations. They want to see homeschools regulated. They are advocates for government involvement in your homeschooling. And if that means the government comes to your door and inspects your homeschool or gives you a safety inspection or makes sure you're not doing something to your child that they don't approve of or whatever, that's exactly what they're pushing for. So when they put out information, you have to be cautious. You have to be cautious because anybody putting out information, I'm a researcher. When I do research, I understand I have biases. And I will tell people from dawn till dusk, I have a bias towards home education. And if I'm going to conduct research, I have to acknowledge that bias. And I have to do research and do it with the understanding that there's no way I can be unbiased at all. I love how there's this expectation that science, and especially social science, can be unbiased completely. It cannot be unbiased. Everybody has a worldview. Everybody has a presupposition that they start from with any given idea. And so it's best to understand them. So the organization that I work for is called the National Home Education Research Institute. You may know it by its acronym NHERI, N-H-E-R-I. You can find us at nheri.org. And there is a ton, meaning 30-some years of research that is publicly available, published online, not behind a paywall. You can access every bit of it. And we are an organization that compiles and publishes home education research. So you will find other sources out there, CRHE and others will say, well, don't trust NHERI because they're biased. I don't trust CRHE, they don't trust me, and that's fine. I totally accept that. Okay? We do indeed try to do our best to make sure we push out quality research. We conduct research. We publish research that other people do. We don't even necessarily hold off on research that we wouldn't particularly agree with. If it's good quality research and it's done in a good quality way, it'll be published out there. There are people who have actually published in our journal that I wouldn't stand beside on a stage and speak with because they have a position that's different than mine on certain things. But if they're going to conduct a study and it's going to be a good quality study, we're going to publish that. So you've got those organizations. You've got a new one coming out. I don't know if there's even, I'm sure there's a link for it somewhere online. I really haven't looked for it, but it's a Harvard Hub for Home Education or something along those lines. Anyway, they're purported to be individuals that are completely disinterested, completely unbiased, as they would try to put it out there, that are going to be trying to gather and publish information. But of course, you got to take that with a grain of salt. If you look at the people that are organizing that and that are involved with it, it isn't entirely an unbiased population of people that are involved in that. So, where do you get your information from? I know that's a difficult thing. Honestly, I think we should really put our faith and trust in God. Here's one of the myths that I'd like to address. And this comes up pretty much every time there's a discussion about school choice is whether or not there are going to be strings on a particular school choice legislation towards home educators. So many home educators still believe that there is a way for school choice legislation to exist without strings. And I will admit, it is possible. It is possible for legislators to write a piece of legislation that literally has no strings in it. My doubt is whether or not it will stay that way. If you've ever been involved in the legislative process, followed bills, especially year after year, any bill that we have is a year away from being rewritten, dismantled, completely changed from its original purpose, and made to do something that it wasn't intended to do to begin with. So sometimes even those who are good, solid, conservative legislators, and they love homeschooling and they want to support homeschooling, and they're like, I got this great idea. This is going to be great for homeschoolers. And then they're flabbergasted when the homeschoolers go, I'm like, well, why? We want to help you. We want to give you something for free, right? That's always it's free. You're not going to have to pay for it, okay? It still comes out of my pocket. A couple of statements up here. With government shekels come government shackles. With government cash comes government control. With government money comes government mandates. You got any more? There's more phrases like this. I love these. Anybody hear any other ones? Basically, once the government has its hands in something, it has to control it, okay? Now, I'm a conservative, fiscal conservative when it comes to politics and so forth. And so if government is going to be spending money that is taking from me, I want to know that it's being spent correctly. Right? I want to know that somebody's being wise with it. So they're going to have to track it. And when it comes to my homeschooling, I would just assume they not track it. Okay, contemporary examples right here in Wyoming, the ESA passed. We had legislation passed, let me correct this, in 2023. Then the governor line item vetoed some of the income breakout of that particular law. So it wasn't considered a universal school choice bill because not everybody could take a part of it. This year, that went through a whole nother role of legislative wrangling, and it came out, and now all of a sudden Wyoming is being proclaimed as the next state with a universal ESA program. National advocates, and I'm fighting the temptation to name some names, will come out and say, well, yay, Wyoming is the next one on board with the government school choice programs. And of course, I'm cringing whenever I read that. The governor of Arizona, I believe this was last year, came out and made a statement saying that school choice needs more accountability. Now, Arizona has been kind of the poster child for these kinds of programs because I think they were the first ones to do it, or definitely one of the earlier ones to do it. And so there's been a little bit more of a track record there to be able to go look back, see the effects of it, and of course, I get a lot of the information that I have not from some sort of nationwide study, because nobody's really done that. Nobody's interested in funding that from what I can tell. But I get it from homeschoolers, from those that are involved in homeschool leadership, from homeschoolers themselves. And they're telling me right now that things have just gotten chaotic in Arizona. Not only does the government want stricter controls over home education, the cost of educational services has skyrocketed. Those who are involved in private education says this has driven prices up across the board. So even though that's not my realm, it's obviously something that needs to be considered and talked about. West Virginia, Washington, Idaho, Utah. I did a conference in Nebraska earlier this year. These are all states. Tennessee is fighting it. Illinois is fighting it this year. Every time one of these programs come in, year after year, there's always that propensity to get their hands just a little bit deeper into the program, and every time they do, there's always going to be a little bit of overreach. When people say the school choice initiatives don't have strings, I say correct. They have chains. And if they're not obvious right at the beginning, they will be at some point. Okay, so definitions are a big problem. The definitions when it comes to school choice is a huge issue because not everybody even agrees on what constitutes a homeschooler or homeschooling. I've tried to tackle this just a little bit. Some people believe that any education that happens in a home is homeschooling, i.e. COVID. And I hear this all the time, I don't necessarily disagree with the statement, but I kind of chuckle when I hear it, like the whole world became homeschoolers, right, during COVID. Well, they weren't in government institutional schools. They were at home, but based on my definition, most were not actually doing what I would call homeschooling. Are virtual schools completed at home? Are those home educators as well? How about cash cow programs that trap home educators? And when I talk about this, I'm specifically talking about programs that say, come register with our program. Your child ends up being registered in a public school on a public school register. You get to file some receipts to get reimbursed for certain expenses. And I've been on a social media site for one of these organizations, and the conversations would just blow your mind. Ooh, what can I spend my money on? What can I buy with this money that I can just make up an excuse and make it sound like it's education related? And if you, as a taxpayer, read that stuff and you think this is what our taxpayer money is going for, it just makes you cringe. Learning pods and micro schools. Again, this is becoming more popular. What is a learning pod? What is a micro school? Some of these are a teacher-led program, where parents pay a particular teacher to teach any number of children, perhaps in our age range, perhaps a whole spread of grades. Basically, it's like a one-room schoolhouse, right? Now, I would say that's probably better than a government institutional school, but I personally wouldn't call that homeschooling, specifically because I believe parents need to be directly involved in the home education process in order for it to be home education. How about co-ops? Parent-led, drop-off co-ops, private school outreach. These are obviously something that we've all been involved with, or most of us have probably been involved with or exposed to. I've been involved in these. I've taught at co-ops. I've led co-ops. These definitely can be beneficial to the home education. But do these qualify as home education in and of themselves? These are the questions that float around. And as you can imagine, when legislators are trying to come up with legislation, you get 5 or 6 legislators together, and you'll get this many different ideas about what home education is. And so when one of them stands up in a committee or on the floor of the House or the Senate, and they're saying, we need to do this for this particular group of people, they're not all thinking about the same group of people, not at all. And so that's a major problem. So my definition for home education is this: parent-directed, privately funded, free market-enabled education that is centered in the home or centered in the family. That is my definition for that. I've kind of culled a bunch of different sources, and I believe this to be the most, I don't know if I want to use the term, sort of the purest form, ideal, if you will, perhaps for home education. Just so you know, anybody that chooses to use any of these other things, I am not against you. I am still willing to support and help anyone who's doing home education, even if your version of home education isn't the one that I would choose doing. But I do want to make sure that you understand the potentials for falling into the traps that could potentially come, or the traps that are already existent and landing out there. Ideally, home education is supported by a faith community. This is honestly where I think home education could literally take the next step forward, like rocket shot forward, is if faith communities got together and decided, let's look at the Bible. Amazing. Let's start with the Bible. Who's responsible for educating children? I don't think you can do a serious study of the Bible and really come to the conclusion that it's anybody other than the parents. I know I haven't come to that conclusion, right? So what is the church's responsibility? Does the church have a responsibility? I believe the church does. I believe the church has a responsibility to enable and support the effort that the Bible puts forward when it comes to the education of our children. Of course, you're going to have the stories, but what about ... scenario, situations, and so forth? Are there children who wouldn't be assisted, who might not otherwise be assisted if a church doesn't take some role? I think the answer is yes. And the Bible gives us an example of exactly what pure religion is: to help the fatherless and the widows. And I think if families in the church are enabled by the church ministry to fulfill their responsibility, and then the church reaches out to the community to then further impact the community. That is the church's role in the education realm. It is not to usurp the parent. We've seen that happen over time, and I believe it is to the detriment of our children, both educationally, academically, and especially spiritually. To enhance this, we must eschew educationally ineffective schooling paradigms. This is something that I'm working on. I'm actually working on a book. I have no idea when it's going to be done or ready to be published. But what I like to communicate to school family or homeschool families is this. There are a lot of things that schools do that they have to do because they're schools. And most of them, many of them, you don't have to do at all. And if you can identify, eliminate, avoid all of these educationally ineffective schooling paradigms, you will be many further steps down the road to giving your child the best education that you can possibly give them. Schooling and education are not the same thing. Now, I say that in this room, and I probably get a lot of the head nods. I say that outside of a homeschool convention, and I get a lot of staring in the eyes, right? Schooling and education are not the same thing. Schooling means you go through the process. You attend the classes, you go through the program, you get the instruction, you take the tests, you're done. You get a piece of paper, that's it. How much of what you get in that process is literally ingrained in your mind for life? Now, I don't even really have to do this. Just think about all the things that you learned in school that you no longer have any ability to even talk about. I teach foreign languages, so that's one of the examples that I like to go to. How many of you took a foreign language in high school or college? Okay, keep your hands up if you can still speak that language at the level that you could at the end of your schooling. Okay, a couple of hands maybe. Some were going down slow, maybe a little bit, right? Okay, I get it, right? Music, same thing. How many took a music lessons as a kid, but would be very scared to get up in front of an audience and play those same things? Okay, the retention of information is just not there for schooling, for the process of schooling. And by the way, that crosses the academic spectrum. You know, you test high school graduates 10 years after they graduated, and they are not even at high school level knowledge in the subjects that they took all the way up through graduation, unless they have had something that has driven that learning, reinforced it, they've used it, they've practiced it, they needed it, they wanted it. Those are the things that drive education. So definitions are a problem. Educationally ineffective schooling paradigms. I totally got ahead of myself. I always do. But these are some of the things I have out there. What are things that we don't have to have in order to have education? Schedule, daily, weekly, yearly. Do you start your school day at the start of a typical school day and finish by the time it's done? Do you go Monday through Friday? Do you go May through September? You can do all those things. I know my family, when we first started, we matched school schedules, right? We wanted to have our school breaks when the public schools had we matched everything, but it was not a need. Certainly isn't necessary. You can school all year round. You can school, you don't have to school as long. You don't have to school at a particular time of day. Classes and classrooms. I love to tell this story. I told it in one of my other sessions that when my family started homeschooling, we set up a classroom in our house, a little schoolroom, right? Some of you guys probably have schoolrooms. That's great. We had desks. We had a chalkboard, like actual chalk, like an old-fashioned chalkboard. My wife made a bulletin board. We had all the things that you would see in a school classroom, up to and including the point where my wife made this little hall pass. Homeschool hall pass, right? And I chuckled at it one day, and I'm like, well, what do we need a hall pass for? Well, she's got an elementary education background, taught in a Christian school. And so, you know, what the kids do, you have to go to the restroom, they get a hall pass from the teacher, and they carry that with them when they're out of the classroom so they're not in trouble. I don't think our hall pass ever came off the wall. It was like tacked onto the wall. It was kind of cute to have it there. But it's illustrative of our mindset. Our mindset, at least when we started, was entirely schooling, the process of schooling. And we can totally move away from that, and we have. My son sits on a bed and does homework or schoolwork sometimes. Right now he's sitting on a bed because he's got a cast on his foot. He just had surgery. You know, in the wintertime, we sit in front of the fireplace on the couch. When it's spring and fall, nice weather, we go outside on the deck and put up a shade tent. We don't have to have a room. We don't have to have a place. We don't have a schoolroom anymore. I actually have a recliner in my son's room, and if he's sitting at the desk in his room, I can be in the recliner. Amazingly enough, he's not at the desk very often either. We just pretty much homeschool wherever. How about standardized tests? Some people choose to do this. Some people don't choose to do this. I chose not to. Certainly, if you want to, you can do that. Just be aware that the standardized test is predicated on the standardized teaching. And if you're not doing standardized teaching, you may not get the result you think you're going to get. Or maybe you will. Maybe your kids will ace those standardized tests because they've gone so far beyond them without even having the program to teach to those tests. But I don't think they're necessarily a necessary gauge for education. Teacher certification, obviously not something that I think is necessary, and people might find that kind of funny to say. They're like, well, yeah, we've got a doctorate of education. Well, just so you know, I didn't have any background in education. I actually got into postgraduate education school without a master's in education, without any background in teaching, and without an undergraduate in education. You might be asking, how did you get into the program? And I ask myself that question all the time, but apparently I did a good interview or something. My wife did have a background in teaching. She had a bachelor's in education. She taught at a Christian school. The question is how much of that is really effective for home education? And the answer to that I have received and both experienced, the answer is very minimal, if at all. Sometimes it's actually counterproductive. We definitely don't need the administrative bureaucracies. That little chart up there, which is probably hard to see, is the growth in the number of students, teachers, and administrators over the course of the years from 2000 to 2019. Anyone want to guess what the red one on top is? Administrators, right? Huge bureaucratic burden in the schools. We don't need that to educate. As home educators, we have proved that. We don't need it. We don't need the counselors. We don't need the psychologists. Probably better off without most of those anyway. Medical providers. Do you really want the medical providers in your child's life when you're not there knowing about it? And of course, if you've read news articles about this, some of the stuff can be just absolutely devastating to children. Schools require organized structure, but none of these things are inherently necessary for education. They have to manage the bulk of people. It's a process. It's industrialized. Schools believe they need these things, and if you stay entangled within the system, then you will eventually believe that you will need those things as well. But you don't need those things. Eschew educationally ineffective schooling paradigms. How do we do all of this without government help? So that's what probably is a big idea that pops into people's minds is, how can we tackle this huge responsibility without the help of a government? The government has to be involved in order for us to have X, Y, and Z. I don't know if you've ever heard these arguments. They span way outside of the education realm. But we actually had roads before the government got involved in making roads. And if you've been around where they do make roads nowadays, by the way, if you work in the construction industry, I am totally not dissing you, but seriously, it doesn't seem to be a great job, right? It seems to be like it's just this never-ending cycle, and it doesn't ever seem to be quite what it needs to be. When the government says we're here to help, we are right to be skeptical. More accurate, we're right to be afraid. In the military, I used to, whenever we had inspections, it was always kind of a running joke when the inspectors would come in. We're here to help you, and we would all laugh really, really hard and think that it wasn't quite what it was. But what I encourage home educators to do is to go back to Scripture. Okay, God has called parents to teach and train your children. That's the fundamental baseline from which we should start. There is no compartmentalization of the sacred and the spiritual. When it comes to academics, there is some idea that perhaps that some things can be taught outside of a Christian worldview. In other words, I can go ahead and teach my kid to add and subtract and multiply and divide. That doesn't really necessarily have to be something that's wrapped up in faith. And yet, what have we seen when you try to disentangle those things, which, by the way, you don't. You don't really disentangle them. What you do is you change from one faith or one religion to another. What you end up with is some of the stuff that you may read about in news reports, which is a school system has decided that kids that want to answer 2 + 2 is 5 are not going to be marked wrong because that's what they believe is true. Relative thought processes, fuzzy new math, whatever they want to call it. Okay, that's what you get when you take a subject that you think is devoid of God and you try to teach it without God. You get away from what we know to be the truth, because if you don't start with the truth, you're not going to have the truth when you end up. Education is discipleship. You will hear people probably talk about how, well, my child might go to school for their academics, but then, they can get their spiritual training, usually in like a church program or something like that. Perhaps a family even does something individual in their home, which I hope families do. I pray that families would do that. But what the assumption there is that what they get in schooling is not religious, that it's not discipleship. But all education is discipleship in one religion or another. And so I get asked the question, so what's the religion of a public school? Haven't we eliminated religion from the public school? Well, the answer is it's secular humanism. You say, well, that's not a religion. I don't see churches of secular humanism. If you don't think it's religious, I encourage you to read the Humanist Manifesto. You can find it online, full text. You don't need to pay anything for it. It's public domain. It's religious. Founders, such as John Dewey, signers of the Humanist Manifesto, plainly, clearly in their writings indicated this is religious. It covers the fundamental reasons for existence, and it is going to cover that need of religion in the lives of the people who we want to influence. No education is religiously neutral. Your children will be discipled. The question is this, in an institutional schooling system, who disciples the children? You think, well, the teachers probably do. Certainly part of it, but not all of it. The curriculum, part of it, but not all of it. The peers, probably the biggest influence of all of those, is part of that discipleship. Now, why do I say that to a group of home educators? I'm not in the public school systems, so I'm not worry about that. But we do have a tendency to bring those things into our home education environment if we're not specifically looking out for those things that we can eliminate, that are not effective towards education and that are not conducive to Christian discipleship in our home. What must we trust in? So when you get the questions about, I've got this scenario, how can it be done? And I will be the first to raise my hand and say, I don't have the answer to every scenario. If you bring me a scenario and say, well, this family went through this situation and this is where they're at, so they can't homeschool. Yeah, I'm not going to have the answer to every one of those situations. But I know the Bible gives us this answer. God will equip whom he has called. You say, okay, that's good. God called Paul to be, a missionary and an evangelist, and God called the apostles to do their thing, but, I'm not really called to do anything. But yet as parents, we are absolutely, positively called to the teaching and training of our children. We've gone over scriptures. You've probably seen them up on screens in multiple presentations. I've seen them at just about every homeschool convention I've ever been to. Deuteronomy 4:6-9. Right? Teach your children diligently. What do you teach them? To love the Lord their God with all their heart, all their soul, all their mind. Teach them from the time they get up to the time they go to bed and all the time in between, which can't happen if I send them away for 7 or 8 hours a day. That is my responsibility. Fathers, raise your children up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Nurture is paideia. Nurture is education. We like to think of nurturing as kind of the mom thing. But that verse in Ephesians is directed at fathers. Raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Look at Psalm 78. Generational passing on of the knowledge of the Lord. And as soon as you try to separate all that, well, we're going to teach Bible at church and they're going to get their academics at school. Think about the time differential. The average student that goes through a K-12 public schooling system, and I've read numerous numbers, so it obviously varies from place to place, 14, 15, 16,000 hours that those children will be pressured, taught things that are not according to the Word of God, convinced that you as parents don't know what God has said you know and can pass on to them, and convinced. God will supply those whom he has equipped. We can go to multiple Bible examples to see how God supplies and equips those whom he has called to do a particular duty. I threw a few examples up there on the slide, but I will tell you this. We may feel inadequate. We may feel like we don't have what we need to do this responsibility, but God has called you to it. And if we realize that, and then we rely on God to give us what we need, day by day, piece by piece, throughout our children's education, he will give it to us. School choice is educational welfare. Now, this is a statement. I put it up there. Actually, no, I didn't put that one in quotes, but My boss at National Home Education Research Institute came out with a paper. By the way, you can look this up. It's on our site, neary.org, and it's basically called, if you just look up educational welfare, it'll pull up there. And basically, he came out with this. He says, you know, conservatives will eschew anything socialistic, right? And I would say homeschoolers, by and large, are a conservative group. Not entirely. Maybe not everybody here is. That's fine. And if you ask conservatives, would you support universal health care? That means the government pays for all health care. They tax the people for it. They tax the companies for it. By the way, just so you know, company tax is a euphemism for taxing the people, just because taxes get passed on to the customers, right? So the government's going to pay for all health care, universal health care system. Conservatives, you want to support that? No. We fight it tooth and nail, right? We shout it down. It's socialistic. We've seen it in other countries. It doesn't work, right? Universal health care, no. You ever heard of this concept? Universal minimum basic income. Some places are trying to push this where it's like, okay, well, the government is going to provide enough money to every adult so that adult can meet all their minimum basic needs. In other words, you're not going to have to work to meet your minimum basic needs. If you want extras, you can work, but you don't have to work. Okay? Fortunately, we haven't seen this implemented, but the idea seems ridiculous, right? You're like, no, that's not a great idea. And then we say, universal school choice. And conservatives go, yeah. Okay? What they miss is the same concept flows. The exact same concept flows in that the government is going to take what it needs to take from the people so that it can provide what it feels is the benefit to the people, being the beneficent government that it is. When it comes to school choice, conservatives are often oblivious to the fact that what they're giving into is socialism. And these programs are in fact socialist at their core. I also make the case, I've made this case in writings that I've done before, that the institutional schooling itself is socialist at its core. So if those are things that you don't support, then there's no way conscientiously you can support this. And when I bring this up, I get a lot of stares, especially from some of our friends, some people who are very conservative in the legislature, but they don't want to hear that. What we want is true freedom. This is a position that I stand for. And again, I say this, and hopefully I've said it enough, maybe I haven't. If you choose not to do this, I am not against you. If somebody chooses to take ESA funds and they want to come to me because they want help in homeschooling something, I am more than willing to help somebody. I don't want to distance myself. I just want to warn of what are the potentials. If we want true freedom and we take money from the government, we're inevitably going to give up some of that freedom. Quote from Benjamin Franklin, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." I would paraphrase that by saying if we give up a little liberty for the privilege of doing what God has called us to do, then we are no longer relying on God to fulfill this work in us or in our children. So that's my position. Hopefully it's a biblically based position. That's the intent that I would want to communicate with that. Let's see if my slide goes. No. Okay. Don't take the cheese, it's a trap. Now I've left about 10 minutes for us to have a conversation. If you have any questions, I will try to answer questions. My position on this is simply that I don't see it as beneficial to the end goal that as Christian home educators, our children become followers of Christ and ambassadors for his kingdom on this earth. I do understand, especially on this issue, not everyone's going to agree with me. But I'll open it up to the floor if you have any questions, specifically as it relates maybe to what we have going on here in Wyoming or other information that I may have. And I may not, by the way. Yes, ma'am.
Could you share what you see as the strings or chains attached to our specific program, our ESAs?
Okay, so as I understand it, and if you know better, please feel free to jump up and correct me because I am not the 100% expert on that. This Brennan wants to make a comment. Yes, the question was, what are the specific strings as it relates to the Wyoming ESA program? So right now, the Wyoming ESA program has what I like to call a carve-out. That is a phrase in the law that says if you are homeschooling under, and I don't remember the statute number, but it's our standard homeschooling statute number. If you're homeschooling under that, what is written into this ESA law does not apply. Okay, it's great. We fought to get that in there, like to carve us out from there. The problem is whether or not future legislation will simply refer to homeschoolers without making the distinction between the two. So if our legislators come up with an idea and they're like, okay, well, by the way, chances are something happens if there's a negative situation. That's a lot of times what drives legislation. For instance, in California, a family was homeschooling. They were found to be like abusing their children or something like that. Well, that drives the legislator to try to make a law to correct all of that. And when they do that, more likely than not, if we're not actively engaged as an organization and as homeschoolers, there could be a blanket application of, well, this is what we need to do to fix homeschooling. And maybe it is just related to the ESA school at home students. By the way, I make this distinction. Hopefully I do it enough. I describe those who are schooling at home using ESA funds as ESA school at home students. Those not using ESA funds as homeschoolers or home educators. And I don't do that to disparage anybody. I just want to make that clear distinction. So let's give an example. The testing requirement. If you take part of the ESA program, your children are required to take testing. Is it annually?
Yes,
Is it annual?
annually, yeah.
Why top annually? I knew it was some. I didn't know the exact frequency of
Is
it.
it only YTOP?
Yes, as of right now, it is only YTOP. I read it just, I think, 2 days ago because I needed to find out what was all in it. And yes, they do have to take YTOP. I'm not sure if they have to take it in the fall and the spring, but the spring is mandatory. If you partake in the ESA and you do not take YTOP, you are obligated to pay that money back.
I did not know that part.
So, yes.
And I thought there was a caveat in there, like a nationally normed
Yes,
test.
and you can, but you have to do YTOP
Right.
or a nationally accredited. You can choose your own nationally accredited, but you have to provide to the state education department that you have done a standardized test and your child, and these are your child's scores. If you do not provide those, you are obligated to pay the money back that you take. There were other things that were direct strings attached, and I'm sorry, I wish I would have brought the paperwork. You can log on to the Wyoming Education, Department of Education. When you go to fill out the application, I filled out the application, and if I am granted the money, I actually am going now to refuse it because there are too many strings attached.
So
There's some caveats in there about special education. So if your child is special needs, they have an IEP, you move them to a private school service plan. There are some caveats and some strings attached to that. If you are a homeschooler and you take advantage of the public education for organized sports, for your electives, anything like that, you may not be able to have this money. Okay? There are a lot of strings attached.
Yeah,
And
and-
after I looked into it, the document is only 10 pages long. It is written by the Department of Education, Wyoming Department of Education. Please, please, please read it. Don't just go in there thinking, yay, I finally get to homeschool my kiddo in the way I want.
So getting back to the question of how that strings back to home educators, let's say over a course of years, these test scores come back, and what they notice is with these ESA school at home students, perhaps they're scoring lower on the test. Now that actually wouldn't surprise me if that was the truth, not to say that homeschoolers aren't doing a good job, but remember, homeschoolers aren't teaching to the test, right? The schools are teaching to the test. So there's a good chance, and I don't know what the chance is, maybe it won't happen, that those scores show a lower student achievement. Okay, now the legislature is spurred to action. And what are they going to be spurred to action to do? Let's fix homeschooling. And I guarantee they're not going to make that differentiation. And if, we're not there looking and fighting and saying, okay, you just need to not cross this line, it could very easily happen. And if you've been involved in the legislative process, how easily something can get slipped through. Sessions get posted and all of a sudden you didn't even know there was a public testimony, you didn't get a chance to go do it, or you live in a part of the state where it's not easy to run up to the Capitol. By the way, anybody here spots anything legislatively wise, please let Homeschool Wyoming know if you see something. We try to keep an eye on it, but we're not going to spot everything. And if you see something that looks concerning, let us know. If I can, like I live in Cheyenne, so I'll be there. If I got 15 minutes notice, I can be at the Capitol and down in the testimony rooms. And I know there are others that are willing to do that. So that's just an example of how it can happen. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. Brendan, did you have a comment you needed to make? I'm just curious.
I said the same thing. I feel
Okay.
like attention's going to be turned to unregulated, unfunded homeschoolers. And again, it's a little bit of hypothesis. There are global, Sweden, if you look into South Africa, there's global instances of effects on homeschooling with public funds.
Yeah, and there's
Essentially, all forms of education are publicly funded once this happens, right? Privately funded homeschoolers are the last bastion of freedom.
You want me to try to repeat all of that? Oh, put the slide back? Which one? That one? Okay, you're fine.
Is there any more questions? Because I'll make this mic's not live.
Okay, any other questions? And I would have tried to repeat everything you said, but I wouldn't have caught all that. And
Can
I
you
think
turn
you were
this
talking
mic
loud enough they probably picked it up on the mic. So just so you know, it probably got on the recording, just so you know. Yes, ma'am. So that is the new name for the ESA bill. I don't know what prompted the name change. Somebody might have the history on that, but I don't know that it really
Sounds
matters.
free.
And he wasn't Steamboat, like the horse thing that is our state symbol. Why that had to be the name of the bill, I'm not sure. Somebody got some brownie points for putting that through the legislature.
Well, and I can guarantee you that the reason they said this money is tied to some sort of standardized testing is that's the only way you can say from the government, if you're using the government's money, is my money being used the right way? That's the only way they have of figuring out, is it being used the right way? What's our standard of measurement? Standardized testing is our standard of measurement.
Yep, that is what the schools will use for sure. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, thank you for your wealth of information. I appreciate all the time that you've put into this. But one of the things that I really have been struggling with as I've been trying to get this word out to people is how do I help them not look at just today, but down the road? Because I'm looking down the road, you know, my kids are starting to graduate. They're talking about homeschooling their kids and my grandchildren and realizing that the reality is this is going to have such a huge impact down the road. How do I help people to have that forward-thinking, futuristic look?
History.
Okay.
History. So if we look into the history of home education, and it's a broad thing, right? If you look at, you know, maybe some of the stuff that HSLDA has put out, the fights to get us where we are now were so difficult. Stories of children being taken away and parents being jailed, and you know, it's amazing the stories that are out there. A couple of good resources. There's a book that came out last year by a gentleman named Alex Newman. It's called Indoctrinating Our Children to Death. Just so you know, I don't get paid to plug anybody's books, but I plug a lot of them because they're really, really good stuff. Israel Wayne's got a book called Education, Does God Have an Opinion? From a Christian worldview perspective. If you want a thorough treatise on this is what the Bible points you to, that's a good book to go to. Nikki Truesdale's book, Anyone Can Homeschool. Truly, she makes that case and makes a super strong case in that one. So you can look back to some of those. I think the best thing going forward is to make sure we understand the history, because just like anything else in history, you know what? I don't even remember who was the old dead dude that said it. You know, if you don't know your history, you're bound to repeat it, right? I mean, we've seen that happen in other veins. Well, that's going to happen in home education if we don't stay strong on the freedoms that have been hard fought and sorely won. I think I stole that quote from a book. I don't know where it came from. Someone could look up my quote. I don't know. I heard it somewhere. Maybe it was a movie. So I think that's probably the best way. But also just being constantly engaged. I think there's a whole host of new homeschoolers. And again, this is not them failing to do something but just realizing that there needs to be an engagement in order for us to guarantee and be assured that this will continue as far into the future as it can. Don't know if that was a good answer or not.
No, it is a good answer.
And by the way, the wealth of knowledge I have, I mostly take from other people. So thanks for everybody giving me the knowledge that. Let's see, I mentioned Alex Newman's book, Indoctrinating Our Children to Death, Israel Wayne's book, Education, Does God Have an Opinion? and Nikki Truesdale's book, Anyone Can Homeschool. By the way, I recommend that one if you have a number of people that you interact with that maybe have different family configurations, single motherhood, things of that nature. Excellent resource for that. I love it when I get this question. Sometimes I get it questioned by detractors. Well, you can't tell me how a single mother can homeschool. And I'm like, no, I can't. But there are people who can. So yes, it is difficult. Yes, it is a sacrifice. But there are ways to get it done. So those are just a couple resources that popped into my mind. All right. Okay, I don't know if I had I don't think I had a contact slide, but I've had it on some of my other presentations. If you need to get a hold of me, please feel free to use any of the contacts I've given out, or just come up to me. I'll give you a business card. Is there anything else we need to do? Wrap up?
I think that's it.
We're at time. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Hello, how are you? Have we met before? Okay. Okay, yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you to Classical Conversations for sponsoring us. And one more quick correction to our schedule. There was a little spot in our program that said our vendor hall closes at 3. It actually stays open till 5. So please make sure you go and visit them there. And now I would like to bring up Rachel Carmen again. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you, Rachel.
And we're all going to pray that I can get through this. I promise that I feel better than I sound, but I'm not getting any better. Okay. 3 things. I'm terrible at self-promotion, but we are giving away a full swag box of the Bible curriculum that I wrote. And so if you'll just go over and put your name and your email address and your phone number, we'll draw somebody tomorrow, and you can look at that. And feel free to pray for me the whole time we're talking this afternoon. It was a 25-year project. You can teach your children the Bible. We've owned Apologia for 18 years, I think. And when we first started going to conferences with science, people would say, and they're like, thank you so much for making it possible for me to teach my kid biology or chemistry or even physics. And I would say, that's great. What are you doing for a Bible? Oh, I could never teach the Bible. Look, if you're not teaching the Bible, why are you teaching anything? You've got to be teaching your kids the Bible. And yes, you can. This Bible curriculum is set up where I actually teach the first half of the lesson on a video. So it's all live stream, it's all streaming, right? And you watch the video, and then you read the second half of the lesson with your kids. And there are 40 motions for the timeline of the Old Testament, 40 motions for the timeline of the New Testament, and then a key word for every book of the Bible. Your kids, and you, by the way, can learn what every book of the Bible is about. You can know what Habakkuk's about, right? And so it's not intended to be a one and done. In the 26 years that we home educated, I just did New Testament, Old Testament, New Testament, Old Testament, New Testament. I just let it build on itself. So check that out. You can go to apologia.com and look at a sample lesson. And it doesn't even have to be my curriculum, but teach your kids God's word, okay? Also, I have 2 books that are out there that I haven't mentioned yet. One is How to Have a Heart for Your Kids. This is my journey into homeschooling. I mentioned it earlier about how we have a culture that encourages moms' hearts to be hard towards their children. This is about how to keep your heart soft. So this is my testimony of how I got into this. Remember, I did not want to do this. I made fun of you people. And then how many times do I have to tell you this was originally with Focus on the Family? I had a moment with one of my sons when I put my hand on his shoulders and I said to him, look at me when I'm talking to you. And it was like the Almighty said, yeah, Rachel, that would be great. And what I realized in that moment was that I was holding my children to a higher standard than I myself was living. I expected them to listen to me, but I wasn't listening to him. And what I discovered is the things that he was wanting to say to me showed up in my children. So that's what this is. It's 63 things we say to our children that I believe God wants to say to us. And both of these are available over at the booth. And you check those out. Okay, so in this moment, part 2, I have a card for you to go home, but I might forget it, so somebody remind me. Deal? Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so this here and now, right here and now, this is your moment. If we had a map, just imagine you are here. Now, you may not want to be here. Fair enough. You may not want to be here, but here you are, right? We need to be mindful of where we are. We need to accept where we are. I love what Elizabeth Elliot says about this. In acceptance, there's peace. All too often, we expend a lot of energy just being ticked off. Amen? Let's confess. Let's be honest. You're not fooling anybody, right? The Almighty is not fooled. We waste a lot of time just being ticked off. We need to acknowledge where we are. Your God is big enough. Isn't this good news? Your God's big enough for you to be honest with him because he already knows. But it's good for you to be honest with you, right? It's a really good thing to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so I want to unpack these 4 stories, these 4 people that I think are so significant in their moment. I would like to propose to you that none of us should ever whine about having a bad day ever again. When we think about Job, I have been guilty of whining about a bad day. And I would argue I've had some real doozies. But then I read his story and I have not had a bad day. I have not had a bad day. There was a time in my life when I thought it would be really cool to have been included in Holy Writ. Have you read these stories? I'm really content not to be in it. They paid a high price. They went through some hard things. Think about Job with me. Let's look at this again. Job's doing fine. He's been blessed. He's got 10 children. He would have won the book just now, right? He's got 10 kids. All these flocks and herds. He's got a great reputation. Things are going great. And then it says that the enemy went into the presence of God, and God called the enemy's attention to Job. Based on the fact that Job was doing so great. Yikes. And the enemy goes, well, of course he's doing great. Everything's going great. Ooh. What's glorious and what I think we sometimes miss is that God knew that Job was doing great because Job's heart was right. It wasn't about the other things. God knew that. Yes, God had blessed Job. God had blessed Job. But God knew that Job's heart was set on God above and beyond all the stuff. How do I know that? Because that's what Scripture says. God says, oh no. Just don't touch him. Game on, says the enemy. I would dare you to study Job, just chapter 1. In quick succession, 1, 2, 3, 4 messengers arrive with news for Job. And let me just say, I have launched 7 children. 3 into New York City, 1 to an art school, which I would argue was worse than New York City. I don't want a midnight phone call. This is news nobody wants. In quick succession, 1 messenger comes and says, all the donkeys, they are gone, and I'm the only one that survived to tell you. Messenger number 2, all the sheep, gone, and I'm the only one that survived to tell you. Messenger number 3, all the camels, gone, and I'm the only one that survived to tell you. Oh, no, 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 and here comes a 4th one. All your kids are gone. All your kids are gone. And I'm the only one that survived to tell you. And what does Job do? It says he rends his garment and he falls on his knees. The Lord gave and the Lord took away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Whoa. Whoa. Second time time God gives the enemy permission to test Job. And this time, he's given permission to touch him physically. Just don't take his life. Really? I think there's evidence here that God really knew Job's heart. And so he does that. You ever been really sick? I mean, like really sick? Like the kind of sick that you wonder how it was that you could, like yesterday, walk across a room, and like today you can't. Job has been reduced to sitting in an ash pile, scraping himself the boils that he's covered with broken pieces of pottery. Now, it does not say this in Scripture. Let me be clear. But I'm wondering, given what we subsequently learn about his wife, bless her heart. I'm going to just tell you, I think the woman gets a bad rap. Why do we get the one thing she said when she's standing over 10 fresh graves? 10 fresh graves. Maybe she broke that pot. And he's scraping himself. And he's sitting in an ash pile. Oh my goodness. And we complain about having a bad day. Whoa. This was his moment. This was his moment. And then his friends show up. I want to say, his friends were doing great when they weren't saying anything. But get this. I would suggest to you, study this book. We have said some of these same stupid things. Right? Cannot imagine that something like this would happen. I mean, they drill him. You've got hidden sin somewhere. You've done something. This just doesn't happen. Look, again, we are in a fallen world. Bad things happen to good people. It happens. And he holds on, and he holds on, and Job holds on. Yes, he questions the Almighty, and you'll notice when he does so, the Almighty's big enough for it. And what does he say? In the beginning, he says, the Lord gave and the Lord took away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And towards the end, he says, I know that my Redeemer lives and he will yet stand on the earth. What do you know when you're at the bottom? What do you know? What do you hold on to in a free fall? Surrounded by ashes and people questioning you. What do you hold on to? Job held on to hope. I know that the Lord, my Redeemer, lives and he will yet stand on this earth. In other words, Job said, it's not about what's going on to me right now. This is not what it's about. There is someone above all of this. Do you know that? In your moment, do you know that there is someone that you have hope above your circumstance? That's what Job held on to. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, I believe he could endure. And that is the hope we have the opportunity to pass on to our children. I would suggest to you, hard days are ahead. Your kids are going to face hard decisions. They are going to be tempted. You cannot always be there. Do they have this hope so that they can endure? Next, let's talk about Mary. Now, I'm just going to say, when I look at the story of Mary, if there's anybody in the Bible I think God should have cut a break to, it would have been Mary. Is that fair enough? I mean, she agreed to carry his son. Fair enough. The angel comes and says, you will be overshadowed by the Almighty, and you will bear a son. And she asked her a really good question. How's that going to happen? And he explained it to her, and what does she say? May it be unto me as you have said, according to your word. There's a phrase for you to study in Scripture. According to your word. And then it was just easy peasy, right? Walk in the park. Everybody understood, right? Everyone was excited for the young unmarried woman to be pregnant, right? No. She should have been stoned in the street. She should have been. Joseph proved himself worthy of being her husband, and an angel visited him in the nighttime and assured him that what was conceived in her was of the Holy Spirit. And he decided to take her. But he had to choose to obey too. Do you see that? He had to make that choice. But can you just imagine? Her mother had dreamed of Mary getting married. Her friends had dreamed of being part of that service, of that celebration. And now she's claiming that she was visited by the Holy Spirit. Right. So a few years ago, I did a retreat about Mary. 5 hours of teaching, so I don't have time to go into all of it here. But in some of my research, one of the things that I discovered is Mary was not the first young Jewish woman to claim having been visited by the Holy Spirit. Old Testament prophecies pointed to a virgin birth. And so now she's saying that. It's a little unusual, isn't it? It's a little unbelievable, isn't it? I kind of think the census was a gift. Wouldn't you agree? Wasn't God good to give them an exit? A reason they had to leave town? They could get out of town for a legitimate reason and not be pointed at and whispered about anymore. And yet it wasn't a short trip. They had to journey together, and I think it was the trip from their hometown all the way to Bethlehem that bonded these two young people together. And then they get to Bethlehem. Have you seen a break cut anywhere here? Have you seen any ease anywhere here? They get to Bethlehem. She is carrying the Son of God. I'm thinking that calls for the presidential suite. Anybody? Shouldn't there just miraculously be an opening at the end for this young couple? She's in labor. Come on, people, play along with me. I know it's late in the day, but come on. Is there room in the inn? You have got to be kidding me. I mean, if I'm Mary, obviously I was not Mary. I would have been like this. Seriously? There's not room in the inn. Are you kidding me? That's all you, are you kidding me? And yet I've been in labor 7 times. And I don't know that I would have cared. So they go in to a stable. Just the two of them. Far from home. No mama. No friends. No one familiar. And she delivers the Son of God. She delivers the Son of God under a really bright star. Because see, although there's no ease in the story, I've also left out the confirmations in the story. Isn't it beautiful that she goes and she visits Elizabeth? And it's when she visits Elizabeth, who also is miraculously pregnant, not conceived of the Holy Spirit, no, but miraculously in her old age, she too is conceived. And Elizabeth gets it. We don't know how much Mary's own parents got it, but we know Elizabeth got it. We also see God's provision and confirmation in the angel that goes to visit Joseph, and Joseph takes her as his wife. We also see provision in the fact that the Lamb of God is born in a stable in Bethlehem, where the lambs for the sacrifice in Jerusalem were raised. Of course, this is where he's born. Of course, this is where he's born. And it is when she goes to visit Elizabeth that we get the Magnificat. It's the joy of the Lord that gives Mary her strength. It's not in the ease of the journey. It's not without criticism or conflict or challenges. It's the joy of the Lord. And you can read about her joy in Luke 1. This great proclamation of the goodness of God. And we're told in Nehemiah 8:10, it's the joy of the Lord that gives you strength. It's the joy of the Lord. Then we can look at Esther. A lot of young women want to be Esther, right? Esther's a great study. Esther is elevated to queen, right? It's an interesting study because you have Esther. So I have a literature background, so I'm all about symbolism and plot theory and all of that. So the first part of it, she's completely under Mordecai, right? And then there comes a switch in chapter 4, right? Where she's already queen, but she's been listening to Mordecai, and then he gives her this challenge. You don't have to do anything, Missy. This is the RRSV, the Rachel's Revised Standard Version. You don't have to do this. But God's going to do something because these are his people. And it's like at that moment, she's like, okay, you go, you get everybody together, and you have them to fast and pray, and I will go into the king, and if I die, I die. Doing the right thing isn't about the right thing happening at the end. It's not about the result. All too often we say, I hear this all the time, well, I'd homeschool my kids if I knew it was going to work for them. Or I knew that would mean they got a college scholarship. Or I knew that they would go into missions. It's not about that. You do the right thing because it's the right thing. Period. You don't do the right thing because I know how it's going to work out. You do the right thing because it honors God. And I would offer you that it transforms you. It changes you to do the right thing. Oh, that we would not only dare to do that ourselves, moms and dads, but that we would dare to raise up a generation that does the right thing. Could we agree that we need men and women who dare to do the right thing? Especially when no one's watching. Especially when it doesn't pay off. But we got to do that first. You cannot give what you do not have. And your kids are watching you. They're watching. Do you dare to do the right thing because it's the right thing? Do you dare to help? Do you dare to see? Do you dare to respond? Do you dare to sacrifice? Do you dare to do what needs to be done when nobody else is watching? That's character. That's integrity. To do it when there's an audience is just to be a part of the world because it pays off. It's not about it paying off. Esther is, look, I'm going to go in and I'm going to do the right thing. I haven't told anybody who I am. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to expose the truth, which was risky, by the way. This Haman dude was a wicked dude. He was wicked. He was a terrible person. Are we willing to call that when called on to do it? Might cost me. Well, it probably will. It probably will. I'm a student of World War II. Let me be clear. The Nazis cannot do what they did unless people are silent. They cannot. They cannot. And neither can you. We cannot expect the world to change and continue to sit and do and say nothing. We cannot. I love what Paul says. To live is Christ, to die is gain. You and I win either way. We win either way. Do we dare, like Esther, to have faith that trusts? Faith that trusts. And then Daniel, you gotta love Daniel. If you haven't looked at Daniel in a long time, I love Daniel 1:8. It says, and Daniel resolved. The story of Daniel has been a long-term encouragement to me because I think there's every evidence in the story of Daniel that he had a praying mother. He had a praying mother that he had been taken away from. So scholars don't agree on how old Daniel and his compadres were, but it could have been like around as young as 11, maybe 14, not too far into adolescence. But they were taken. Why? Because they were handsome and they were intelligent and they were of nobility. And they were taken. I hope it didn't come to that. Are we training our children such that if they were taken, they'd be prepared to resolve to follow God? Oh, I pray that it is so. So it says that Daniel resolved, but let's look at our story. I want to take you over to chapter 6. Daniel serves under several different kings. And I think it's Daniel, let me see, because I'm going to give you homework. You're welcome. It's over in, in chapter 3. That's his compadre's best moment. But it's also chapter 2. Just read the whole thing. But Daniel gets over here in chapter 6, and he's serving under Darius. And Darius puts 3 commanders over a lot of other people who are in charge, right? And Daniel's just rising through the ranks because he's righteous. Why is he righteous? There's only one reason, not your question. Because he serves and honors God. If you serve and honor God, you will be different. And you will be granted wisdom because you serve and honor God. You spend time in his word, you can't help but become more wise and to learn more. And so Daniel's blessed because he worships God. And so the guys that are jealous of Daniel, so jealousy's nothing new. The guys that are jealous of Daniel try to find some reason to trick him up. And they can't find anything. Wow. The only thing they can get Daniel on is that he prays to God 3 times a day. Now let that just sit on you. Could you be found guilty of being that committed to God? I mean, if somebody was going to try to get you on something, would it be that you worship God? That's what they're going to get Daniel on. So these guys go in, and if you look, let's see what it says. The bad guys go in to Darius, and they start flattering him. Oh, King Darius, live forever. And then they get around to what they really want him to do. We think that for the next period of time, anybody who prays to anybody but you, oh great king, should be thrown to the lion's den. And the king is so flattered he can't think straight. And so sure, that sounds great. And so he signs it, and they're like, remember, You can't reverse this. Yeah, right, sounds great. And they run off, and Daniel knows about this. Daniel knows. Does it change what Daniel does? Daniel still goes out and prays. And he doesn't cower. And he doesn't hide it. He throws open the doors and he still prays to God. Why? Because that's at the core of who Daniel is. He's not going to change because some law said he can't worship God. He's not going to do that. And so they catch him. They go back to the king. Oh, king, live forever. We found someone who broke your law. Shocking. It's Daniel. And Darius is like, oh no, what have I done? Remember, you can't change this law. And Darius is immediately like, oh, trying to figure out a way to save Daniel. But I love this because it says, then the king gave orders, and Daniel was brought in and cast into the lion's den. And listen to this. This is verse 16. And the king spoke and said to Daniel, your God, whom you constantly serve, will himself deliver you. Wow. The king got it. But then it also says, in 18, it says the king went off to his palace and spent the night fasting. His sleep fled from him. And he rose at dawn, and at the break of day went in haste to the lion's den. And when he came near, he said, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you constantly serve been able to deliver you from the lions? So he believed and then he doubted, couldn't sleep. And he comes back and he says, do you see that God used Daniel to testify to the king? Do you know that God may allow you to go through something really stupid hard? There's such a thing as stupid hard. Anybody been through stupid hard? He may allow you to go through stupid hard to testify to somebody else, to show somebody else. See, I have a theory. It's concentric circles. In the center circle, it's all about God, because it's always about God. Fair enough? It's simultaneously all about God, and it's all about me, because he's all about transforming me and sanctifying me and burning off all that dross and all that mess and all of me. Amen? It needs to just all be gone. But there's a third realm. It's all about everybody else who's watching. And some of those people I know, and some of those people I never know. But there are always people watching. We used to go to Walmart with 7 children. I papoosed somebody. Come on now. Had the second youngest right here, right? My oldest son pushed the second cart. Y'all with me? And we were at our local Walmarts every Wednesday. That was our out day. And we would go through Walmart. I remember the first time this happened, this woman came out from the bakery. She said, oh, Miss Carmen, I put out the bread you always buy. And I was like, sweet Jesus, do they know when I'm coming to Walmart? She said, you come every Wednesday. You're weird. And people are watching you. And you need to know that because you're responsible. You're responsible. It says they will know we are Christians by our love. By our love. I'd have people come up to me in Walmart and say, these cannot possibly be your children because you're enjoying them too much. What? We live in a culture that if a woman enjoys small children, they're not hers. We have the opportunity to turn that around. To enjoy our children. To lean into moments with them. To be present with them. And to respect our husbands. to respect your man, to stand by your man. This isn't that session, but we have an opportunity to stand for marriage every day. And my question to you would be, are you living a marriage every day worth defending? We can say what we're against, but are we living for what we're for? That's what we're called to do. Don't forget the concentric circles. It's all about God. It's all about his glory. It's all about my transformation. It's all about my testimony. And that's what we see in all of these stories. Job was affected by this. God was glorified by this, and his friends were influenced. At Mary, are we not grateful for Mary and her obedience? And all those people, if you fast forward then, let's fast forward then, shall we, into John and the marriage in Cana? The beginning of Jesus' ministry. I love this. The beginning of Jesus' ministry. The wine has run out. And Mary and Jesus are at the same wedding. And this woman has been waiting 30 years. She has been waiting 30 years for him to be who she believes he is. She's been holding on. People have been whispering for 30 years. I love this. The wine runs out. She looks at the servants. She says, you do whatever he says. And she looks at Jesus like, and I love his response. Woman, don't you love that? It's not mom. It's not Mary. It's woman. And he honors his mother. It's pretty beautiful. And then Esther grows. The people are saved because of her faithfulness, because of her willingness to do something that she shouldn't have done. She risked it all. She risked it all. And then Daniel, the concentric circles. Daniel grows and grows and grows, and people are influenced. And the testimony of God, the name of God. Next slide, please. So what might God do? I don't think we think about this sometimes. Too often we think about all the things we don't want to do. But we don't consider what might God do. What might God do if we took him up on his promises? That he would never leave us or forsake us. That he would always be with us. That he would always walk with us. That he would never abandon us. What might God do if we walked in the light as he is in the light? If we stopped wandering off and chasing after the things of the world? What might God do if we stepped out in faith? I think it was Chuck Swindoll a few years ago, or it's been a long time ago probably. He said, the next time you get to the crossroads, consider taking the path that would take the most faith. We generally get to the crossroads and we go, which one would be easier? Which one would keep me out of hot water? Which one would be the least controversial? What if we stepped out in faith? What if we focused up? How would our lives change in this moment? And not just if we did this, but what if we were in communities that encouraged and supported us doing this? Because I think that's what the church is supposed to be. I think that's what the church is supposed to be. The women that are praying for me this weekend, Jan and Jane and Nita, are those women. And they challenge me. And they ask me really hard questions, often uncomfortable questions. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Those are the kind of friendships we need. There's nowhere in this book that says you be you. He doesn't say that. In this book, it's you be him. Be transformed into his image. Like, don't be you. The world says the answer is within you. There is nothing good within you. The heart is deceitful above all else and desperately wicked. Who can know it? He is your hope. He is what we need to focus on. Next slide, please. So in the meantime and in your moment, here's some things you can do. Seek God. I don't want to say seek him first. I learned this when I was a young girl. The seek ye first passage is kind of tough. So when I was younger, I knew what it meant to sleep in. I don't know what that is anymore. I used to dream when my kids were little about sleeping in. If I sleep past, 6, I have slept in. I'm one of those old women that's up before the sun is. One of my sweetest things on a daily basis is to hear the first bird sing. You know why he asked us to seek him first? Is because it's imprinted on your mind first thing in the morning. You need him first. And let me tell you why. Because he knows what your day holds. He knows what's coming down the pike. You think you do. You might have a really great lesson plan, but he's like, oh, honey. Oh, sweet girl. Dare to spend time with him first. Seek him first. It's really easy to pick up the phone. Turn on the tube. I was raised in a house that had a television in every room, and it was on all the time. I'm going to dare you to turn the world off and seek him first. Next, stay humble. Stay humble. I would encourage you to spend time here. There's nothing magic about this. If it was, we would all do it. But positionally, when you are here, you see him differently. You shrink and he expands when you're here. Spend time here with your husband on your knees. Dare to let your kids see you here. In the morning, when everybody was home, and as they were leaving, before Davis would go to work, before we bought Apologia, we would have family worship before he would go to work. And we would sing the Stephen Curtis Chapman song, which I will not sing for you. You're welcome. But the song, let us pray, everywhere and every day. Every moment of the day, it is the right time. For the Father above is looking down in love. I don't get this, I'm messing it up. And we would get on our knees as a family, all the little ones, all of us, in our living room, and we would pray together. Your kids need to see you here. You need to be here. He's asking you to get here. You will have life circumstances that will bring you here. So practice being here. Serve selflessly. When we were first unemployed, we were on the board for home education in North Carolina. We had been on for 10 years, I think. And our first reaction to unemployment was, we just need to cut everything, right? We can't. I don't think we can pay the mortgage. We got to step away. And someone said, that's the last thing you need to do. You still need to be serving other people, even in your hard place. That's good advice. Sometimes our problems, our situation is so overwhelming we can't see anything else, and we need to dare to see something else, to see other people and serve them selflessly. We need to smile genuinely. When I was a little girl, my mom and I would go shopping to Walmart's. I'm a Southern girl. and it was called Walmart's. We actually called it Wally World. And we would always choose the checkout lady who looked the most miserable. Sometimes it's hard to choose. And it was our goal to make her smile. There's a lot of unhappy people in the world. There's a lot of people who have nothing, no hope. And you and your children have the capacity to give them a smile, to say a kind word, to look them in the eyes, and to pass on your joy. Your smile is the first word of your testimony. Share it generously. We ought to be the most smiling people on the planet. We get to spend eternity with Jesus. We've got the hope of the nations. We know who he is. We say we are his. Last year, we went to Disney. Long story short, Davis and I are walking around. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to hit my timer, and you tell me when you see someone smiling. We're at Disney World. It's supposed to be the happiest place on earth. And people look like they were grumpy. They're Disney World. I would propose to you, you don't get what you've got if you're not sharing your smile. Teach your children to share their smile. Teach your children to smile at each other. The world tells them to glare at each other. You should smile at your spouse from across the room. Somebody ought to think you've got something going on because you do. Smile generously and sing his praises. Point to him. Sing his praises. When I was first a young mom, I wanted to do anything but be at home. So the really short is, Davis and I signed a napkin that said we would never have children. No joke. After being foster parents for 18 months, which was only supposed to be 3. No joke. Then we had one, and then we were certainly done because I'm a firstborn, he's a firstborn, gave birth to our firstborn. We're good. And then we thought that was, we should have another one so they can be friends. So we had number 2, and then we were done. And then we accidentally got pregnant with number 3, but people called her a princess. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then I knew that Davis didn't want any more. So I would tell people, well, I'd have more if it weren't for Davis. And then God got a hold of Davis. Oh! And we had 4 more. That's what God does. That's what God does. If we let God do what he wants to do, how would your life be if you let God do what he wants to do? Less about what you wanted to do. That's what God does. That's what God does. Leviticus 19:2. Be holy, God said, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. That is our charge. You do these things, you're going to be different. You're going to stand out. You're going to have people's attention. You're going to have critics. You're going to be slandered. You're going to be misunderstood. Some people are going to be jealous. Some people will malign you and lie about you. Some will be intrigued. And many will know where to go when things get hard because they'll know that you know. You've got the answers. And they'll ask for you to pray for them. But more than anything, you'll honor God. And that's what the most important thing is. Do I have a next slide? Okay, let's do it. So here's the opportunity, the invitation. Be still and know, Psalm 46:10. Be still and know. In a world that's spinning out of control, dare to sit still. Dare to go out on your porch or in your backyard and listen for the first bird. I got to tell you, do you know what creation is doing? It's singing his praise. That's what it was created to do. I'm one of those really weird people that imagine what words of praise the birds are singing as they're singing. That's what I imagine, because that's what I know they're doing. They can't not praise him. There's this beautiful chorus, and I just sit out on the back of my porch, and I just listen to those birds praise Jesus, and I'm just like, worship him. Be still and know. And secondly, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. Not because you can, but because he will. He will. Do the next right thing. I have for you a card. Collect all 4. And yes, there is one tomorrow for the, what about that child? Assuming that I can talk tomorrow. We'll see about that. But I'll put this over here. I want to ask you to pray with me. If you want to get on your knees, you can. And I've written a prayer on the back of this card for you to take home. One of the things that I've learned as I've spoken across the country and around the world is many of us aren't in the practice of prayer. And so I have found it helpful sometimes to write prayers for people just to get you started, or to recommend the Valley of Vision, which I did earlier today, which is a great resource. And again, I've got mine, so if you want to look at it before you invest in it, you can do that. But this is based on the 2 sessions we did today. So I would invite you, if you want to get on your knees, you can, and we can bow our heads, and I'm just going to read this prayer for you. Father God, you alone are God. You are sovereign and nothing surprises you. Nothing disrupts you. Nothing is hidden from you. You are present. You are with me in the valleys, on the mountaintops, through the fire, through the flood. You go before me. You walk with me. You hem me in from behind. You never leave or forsake me. You are able. You spoke light into existence, set the stars in place and the planets in orbit. You set the limits of the sea. You order the course of the sun and the moon. It was you who parted the Red Sea and provided manna. You filled the walls of Jericho. You sent your son. Jesus made the blind to see, the lame to walk, the deaf to hear. You raised the dead and cleansed the lepers. He walked on water. He stilled the storm. He lived a sinless life, died to pay sin's price, and rose on the 3rd day. And you sent your Spirit, who fills me with wisdom and discernment. I know then that you are sovereign in this moment too, that you are present in this moment too, that you are able in this moment too. So, Father God, show me, grow me, make me, mold me, teach me in this moment more about you as I go forward in your strength and for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. The Lord bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, before you head out, I just have a couple quick things. If you are doing the family night, that's actually over, it's at the Impact Building by Boyd Avenue Baptist Church. That's just down here. You go down Poplar, then you take CY, and I was going to have him pull up a map here in just a minute. As you're going down CY and you're headed out of town to the west here, it'll be on the left-hand side of the road. There's actually the main church. If you could zoom in just a little bit for me, or actually you probably can't, that's a static picture. But as you're going down CY there, there's the 2 buildings there. There's one that says Boyd Avenue Baptist Church. The function's not in the church, it's actually in the Impact Building, which is a little bit just across the street to the east there. And as you see the building, it literally looks like they built the building around the Verizon store that's there. So you can't really miss it. So the parking for that is going to be on the east side of that building. So if you're going to the family night, just park on that east side parking lot. The doors should be open, and hope you'll join us, and should be a good time. So real quick, just if you guys, my name is Seth Tubbs. I'm on the Homeschool Wyoming board. I serve as the treasurer there, helping with the the convention and everything. If you guys have ideas, things that you'd like to run by the board, please come talk to us a little bit. Any other input and things, or if you'd like to volunteer to help out with anything, we would love to talk to you. Any homeschool dads that would love to talk into how these things are shaped and everything, I would love to talk to you. I'd love to get your input, things like that. I know Kyle would, and some Nolan is also somebody who's helped time to time with some of that, but any of those type of things, we're all ears. So thank you for your time, and we will see you tomorrow morning.
Is there a way that you can give us like an address to put into?
Yes, I can. Give me just a moment. Yes, yes. 1930 Boyd Avenue that's the church's address. 1930 Boyd Avenue, that is the church's address. Right across the street is the Impact Building. And that is right off of CY. So Boyd is the one that runs off of CY there. And thank you for bringing that up. That is in the program, that address.